Hello, my friends. This is Sarah Jo Fusen. She was a daycare worker, and she's the daughter of a sheriff, which will come into play in a little bit. But she was convicted of aggravated CA against a little one who she was supposed to be taking care of at a daycare where she worked. Now, I'm going to give an overview of the case, but if you want all the details, including the security footage, the news stories, the trials, all that, they will be linked in the description. But what I want to focus on today is the sentencing hearing. Because as you probably know, once somebody is convicted of something, the sentencing is where they have an opportunity to speak to the judge, to have people speak on their behalf, to try to prove that they're not a monster, that they're redeemable, and that it won't happen again. And the main thing they want to see is remorse. But what happens when you are an irredeemable monster who can't even pretend to be remorseful when 20 years is on the line and nobody, not even your family, has anything good to say about you? Well, that's what we're going to find out in this video, and it will all lead up to the best part when the judge drops the hammer and completely destroys her when he reads the sentence. And he does not hold back. So let's take a look. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.
Well, the daughter of the Montgomery County Sheriff is now a convicted child abuser. Jurors reached the verdict today against Sarah Fusen shortly after she testified in her own defense.
Yeah, it only took them 3 hours to deliberate and find her guilty. So basically, during nap time, there was one little one, like 13-month-old little one, who just wasn't tired or just wasn't taking a nap. So Sarah decided to physically force her down onto the cot to take a nap, and she did that 8 times. Now, first of all, let's just take the humanity out of it, and let's look at it from just a pragmatic perspective. If I am not able to go to sleep, or if I'm just kind of restless, and somebody comes and tries to force my head down to make me sleep, that is not going to work. That is not going to make me sleepy, unless, of course, it gives me a concussion, which, unfortunately, that's exactly what happened, along with a couple of other pretty serious injuries. And before we get into the sentencing hearing, I wanted to take a look at a couple of things that were said during the trial, because I think it kind of sets the stage for the stupidity and delusion we're going to be dealing with throughout.
Would you have continued to keep slamming down the way you did if she had continued to pop back up?
I feel like after that 8th time, I probably would have picked her up and held her because it was so many times and it wasn't working.
Okay, so first of all, notice that she says that she would have done something different because it wasn't working. Not because she felt bad, not because she realized that she was hurting her, but because she wasn't doing what Sarah wanted her to do. That's all that mattered. But also, listen to the way she's so casual about it. She almost says it in a way that's like, well, as you all know, after 8 times of doing this, you try something different if it's not working. No. Anybody who's not evil and has a brain wouldn't do it 1 time, period. And you might be asking, was she overwhelmed? Was she frustrated? Well, I'm glad you asked. In fact, her lawyer asked her that exact same question at trial.
What was your state of mind around nap time on Monday, January 9th?
I was completely happy-go-lucky.
Were you angry?
Absolutely not.
Were you frustrated
No.
about anything?
No, sir.
Was there anything going on in your life outside of work that was troubling you?
No, sir.
You're evil. I'm sorry, you are just evil. If you can say you were happy-go-lucky and nothing was bothering you and you behaved that way towards a child, that makes you look far worse than if you had said, yeah, I was overwhelmed or frustrated. It wouldn't have been an excuse because there is no excuse, but it might have given a reason for why she behaved that way. So either her lawyer met up with her ahead of time and gave her these questions and sort of coached her in what to say, or he let her just speak off the cuff and say whatever she wanted to say. Either way, he's not terribly bright. What he should have done is tried to keep her off the stand, period. She should not have spoken. Now, I'm glad that she did because she showed her true colors, right? We were all able to see how just despicable she is. So it worked out for humanity, but it's pretty stupid on both of their parts.
You said that you have a niece named Willow, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And You saw the video earlier.
Yes, sir.
Yesterday, this week. Let me ask you this. Would you want someone to handle Willow the way that you handled?
No, I would not.
Why is that?
Because I love Willow. She's literally like my child.
And you wouldn't handle someone that you loved in the way that you handled, correct?
I wouldn't handle any child that way like intentionally. That was not intentionally.
You're saying you handled her the way we saw in the video by accident?
I handled her the way that I was trained to handle her.
Would I want my niece handled that way? No, hell no. That was awful. But also, it was an accident. But also, it was exactly the way I was trained to handle her. So, checkmate, lawyer. And I'm not sure how she thinks she can get away with saying that it wasn't intentional. She said that she wasn't frustrated. She even said she was happy-go-lucky.
I was completely happy-go-lucky.
So, how could it not be intentional? Obviously, she was found guilty, so now let's look at the sentencing. We're going to hear just a bit of the mother's impact statement, kind of explaining how they were affected by all this. And keep in mind that while this is happening, Sarah is sitting there hearing every word, and then she will take the stand after having heard what the mother said and try to convince everybody that she is not a monster.
Your Honor, my name is and I am the mother of the child who has been deeply harmed in this case. There are no words to describe what it feels like to realize your baby has been harmed by the very person you trusted to care for her. I had trusted Sarah with the most precious thing in my life, my daughter, and that trust was shattered. For months after the incident, she woke up screaming in the night. She had panic attacks and was showing an overwhelming fear of sleep. As a mother, the emotional turmoil has been unbearable. Every day, I live with the constant anxiety that my children may be hurt again, fear that grips me every time I drop them off at school or leave them with anybody other than myself. After watching the trial videos, my husband and I experienced nightmares, uncontrollable tears, and unable to shake the images from our minds. The trust we once had in the world around us is shattered. Sending my children to school or leaving them in the care of others now feels like a risk that I cannot fully bear. I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share the impact this trauma has had on our lives. And I hope the court's decision reflects the gravity of the suffering and the fear that my family continues to endure. Thank you.
So yeah, I can only imagine the amount of distrust they have in everybody after something like this happens, and the amount of trauma that they're going to have to deal with. And they're all actually pretty lucky that the injuries weren't more severe than they were. So now we're going to hear from Sarah's mom. And again, as dark as this subject matter is, this is where things start getting a little fascinating, because obviously her job is going to be to make Sarah sound as good as possible. But I mean, you can only polish a turd so much, you know?
And you are the mother of Sarah Fuson, is that right?
I'm Sarah's mom, yes.
And where do you live?
Lived there my entire life.
And how are you employed?
I'm a school teacher, elementary school teacher.
How long have you been a school teacher?
And this is year 28.
Describe your relationship with your daughter, Sarah.
When Sarah was born, she was the biggest gift in our life. We just enjoyed, she was the sweetest child. She gained the nickname Sweet Sarah. Everything about raising her was a joy to me. We were actively involved in our church, and one of the greatest blessings was she was baptized at age 7, and that gives me lots of comfort.
If you would...
So he asked, describe your relationship with your daughter, and the best she could come up with was, she was pretty awesome when she was 7. Not a great start.
If you would describe for the judge the impact that this prosecution and trial has had on Sarah.
From the beginning, there was an immense amount of media and social media coverage because of who her father is. This caused extreme embarrassment and shame. I knew that day, January the 10th, when I came home from work and heard what Sarah's account, that very confident, independent girl that we knew and raised was gone. As time went on, she felt that life had no meaning and like she had a gorilla on her back. We committed her to a mental hospital for a couple of weeks. She came home on lots of mind-altering medications. The medications would change off and on. In the process, she's gained about 50 pounds.
We should all feel so sorry for Sarah. Just think of how hard she's had it, you guys. Ever since she slammed that baby's head into the cot, it's been really hard on her because everybody's like talking about how she slammed a baby's head into a cot. Leave Sarah alone. And I guess I understand why the lawyer would ask that, because I think he wants to sort of show that she's kind of already being punished in a roundabout sort of way by having to deal with all this. But I don't know. It's weird that they're not even mentioning the victim or how bad she feels about what happened. It's all about, we should feel sorry for Sarah.
Got her kind of back a little bit mentally stable. Trying to get a new job was very embarrassing, to say the least. She would attempt one after another. With the charges on her record, it would come back when they did a background check. So she would get fired. And some of those firings were very, very humiliating. Everything is worrisome and extremely painful. I am so sorry for all of your pain and all of the trauma and all of the mistrust in society that this has caused you. I've tried. I wanted to from the very beginning to reach out. I was advised not to. I even wrote you all a letter. And I know it wasn't given to you.
So that's all the reasons you should feel sorry for Sarah. Oh, right. Victims. My bad. Yeah, no, sorry about that. I was going to talk to you and say sorry, but they wouldn't let me. But I kind of did. You know, I wrote a letter, but you didn't see it because they didn't give it to you. So we basically already apologized.
We do not, as a family, condone what Sarah did that day. We don't, but we do love our daughter. Also know that Sarah did not think her actions at the time were hurtful. It was only when she saw herself on video that she thought, yeah, that was rough.
Well, that's a problem. If you can act that way towards a little tiny person and not realize the harm you're doing, maybe you shouldn't be around little tiny people or any people at all.
Sarah was raised in a home of public servants. She only wanted to serve others. Sarah is not a throwaway person. She is kind. She is generous. She is loving. As her family, we need her. We depend on her. And we will have a big hole at our table and in our hearts until she is returned home to us.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
So nobody condones that behavior. But of course, the mother has to say that to make sure everybody knows. She's like, listen, I wouldn't have done that if I were her, but I get it. The mother has to try to make Sarah look as good as possible. And I guess there's just not much to work with because so far I'm not sold. I also noticed that the mom never really tried to convince anybody that she wouldn't do it again. She was like, I don't condone it. She didn't realize what she was doing. So I think it's pretty obvious she would do it again. But I kind of feel bad for the family. You know, like she said, they're going to have an empty spot at their table at Christmas and stuff like that. And I get that. But also, if I had to guess, I would say that whatever trouble she's ever gotten herself into, her dad, the sheriff, has gotten her out. So she's never really learned that her actions have consequences. So I'm going to skip over where her lawyer speaks because obviously he's just trying to make her look as good as possible and get the sentence as low as possible. But I wanted to play this one part before she speaks.
My position is pretty simple. The government's pleadings say they want a sentence more than 15 years. They haven't said what number they want, but they want it more. I think that a sentence of more than 15 years is brutal, unnecessary, and inconsistent with the sentencing law. I want to think about 15 years for a minute. I think everybody on this side of the table went to college, most of us. That's 4 years. 15-year sentence is 4 times of being in college. When you put it in real terms of spending time, it's forever. The college was an education, and for most of it, it was having a good time. Being in prison for 15 years is being locked up in a cage.
So I get that lawyers sometimes have to use flowery language to help their client and stuff like that, but does he think the judge doesn't know what prison is or how long 15 years is? I mean, even if you look at the judge's face, he's like, yeah, I get it. You don't have to explain to me why it would suck to be sentenced to prison for 15 years. And just so you know, he spoke for quite a while, but he just kept talking about how long 15 years is over and over again. And I think it's because he didn't have anything good to say about his client. So all he could do was be like, 15 years, come on, it's 15 years. That's a long time. And he's not wrong. 15 years is a long time. It would suck to get sentenced to 15 years. So now we're going to hear from Sarah. And I want you to keep two things in mind while she speaks. Number one, this is a prepared written statement. And then I want you to keep an ear out for what's missing from her statement. And again, this is her trying to prove that she is a good person, she's redeemable, and she doesn't deserve the maximum sentence.
Go forward with your statement.
I want to start by apologizing to Ms. James, the probation officer, about my comments about the case. I was still adjusting to jail and was going through a difficult time. That's not how I feel about the case.
And don't worry, when the judge reads the sentence, he will tell you exactly what she said about the case and what she's apologizing for right now.
I had been working at Tylertown for 6 months when this happened. I loved my job, I loved the children, and I got along very well with the staff. I used to look forward to going to work every day, to be with those children and be in the environment. I was always alone with 6 children in my classroom. Sometimes it was difficult to give one child the attention they needed when I had 5 others to care for. I find myself hurrying and multitasking all the time. It was also hard to give the new children the attention they needed to transition into the toddler room. I didn't realize I was being rough with in the moment. I recognized that I was rough with her and regret my conduct. If I could go back and make this right, I would have been calm and gentle as usually I was and not rough. I love children and animals, and it is not in my nature to be rough. I want to thank my parents and my family for supporting me and standing by me through this very difficult process.
Thank you.
So yeah, a bit of a red flag that the first person she apologizes to is her probation officer for things that she said in the jail, not for her actions towards the little one. And then she says that she regrets her conduct. And I would argue that's just because she's getting in trouble for it. And the rest of that honestly just sounds like she's trying to justify what she did. And then she mentioned that it's not in her nature. But I mean, there are two types of people in the world: those who would physically force a little one down to the point of injury, and those who wouldn't. And she can claim it's not in her nature all she wants, but she did it. So I beg to differ.
To and her parents, I am so very sorry that this happened and what this has put your family through and the trauma that I had to go through.
Notice that she says, I'm sorry that it happened. I'm sorry for the trauma that she has to go through. Not, I'm sorry for what I did. It just happened. She's distancing herself almost to the point of saying that somebody else did it. I'm so sorry this happened to her. And remember, this is a written statement, meaning her lawyer had to approve it. If I were her lawyer, the first thing I would have had her say is, I am so sorry for what I did. I wish I could do something to make it up to the family, to the child. I am so sorry for what I did. To the mother, I am so sorry for the harm that I caused. But she never once takes responsibility for what she did. And it's on video. It's very obvious what she did. So now it's time for the sentencing, and I'm just going to let it play out.
This court observed this trial. I observed the defendant's behavior during the course of the trial and her testimony from the stand during the trial. I'm not sure that I have, before today, I didn't see any indication that Ms. Fuson accepted any responsibility for this. In fact, to the contrary, she not only didn't accept responsibility for her actions, she minimized those actions. She gave excuses for those actions. She talked about how badly she was being mistreated and how unfair things were. I think it's instructive, even though this has been made an exhibit, that when the pre-sentence report was prepared, it's an opportunity for a defendant to give their version of the events. And when our probation officer went to, Ms. James went and talked to her and took her pre-sentence report and gave her an opportunity to be heard, here's what she said. It was O's first day in my classroom, and I was having issues with her sitting up in her chair at breakfast time. So I quickly yanked her back in her chair to keep her from falling to the floor. The second video is of nap time, and I was trying to get her to lay down. She wouldn't, so you can see me laying her down several times, and some parts did look rough. They say I caused bruises, but also say I caused a head fracture. I made sure she did not hit her head, and it was medically proven that she didn't have a skull fracture. But here I am in jail for it when it's not what that was. It was a wormian bone. Then during the interview on November the 13th of 2025, the defendant reported that she was not frustrated during the incident and was only trying to get the child to take a nap during nap time. On multiple occasions, the defendant made the statement, and I'm going to quote it exactly as it's written. I shouldn't effing be here. I didn't do anything. She also stated she had talked to friends, and plenty of them say they had handled their own kids that way. She stated that the victim's mother is a liar, and that the child was fine the next day, and that she brought her to the daycare and handed her to the defendant. She reported they lied in court, and the child had no fracture on her skull. She stated the bruising on the child's arm just looked like a rash, and that the defendant's family is, quote, pissed because she shouldn't be there, and she didn't do anything. She reported she wasn't allowed visits at the jail and that her family needs to sue the jail so she can get out of there. She also discussed how the food sucked, and she really wanted a Dr. Pepper. The interview became solely focused on how this incident has affected the defendant with no concern for the child. That is the pre-sentence version of the events that Ms. Fuson gave. Now today, we saw a different side of her, and obviously if anyone who has a good lawyer is going to tell the defendant that you've got to come forward and make an allocation where you show remorse, I just don't find in this court's opinion that her expressions of remorse today are particularly sincere.
Real quick, I assume when he says that she showed remorse, he's talking about when she said she regrets her behavior or she's sorry about what happened, but that's not remorse.
I think they're motivated by good advice of counsel, as well as the fact that she realizes, having said those things, that those things can come back to bite her. Based upon all of the factors that the court has considered, my observations of the trial, the demeanor of the defendant, both at trial and during her testimony, her statements in the pre-sentence report, and all of the other factors in this court, I'm of the opinion that as to count one of this indictment, the defendant should be sentenced to 20 years in the Tennessee Department of Corrections. In count two, I find that she should be sentenced to 4 years in the Tennessee Department of Corrections, and those sentences will run concurrently with one another. And that is the judgment of the court.
So yeah, 20 years. And then we got to hear through some of her correspondence and the interview with the parole officer that she just never took accountability. She never admitted fault. It was all, woe is me, look at what's happening to me, this is so hard on me. And I think all she had to do at any point was just say, I am so sorry. I should not have done that, and I feel terrible. What can I do to make it up to you? Something like that. But even facing 20 years in prison, she couldn't be bothered. She just wouldn't do it. And again, I'm going to guess, I don't know, but it's probably because she's grown up her entire life never facing consequences because of her dad, the sheriff. So when she actually faces consequences, she doesn't know what to do with herself. She can't figure it out. It feels like she's being persecuted, like that people are picking on her because in her mind, she's like, this isn't supposed to be happening. So not only did she feel like she could act any way she wanted, but once somebody says, hey, you can't do that, you're going to get in trouble, she's like, I'm the victim. I mean, the prison food was bad, you guys. We should all feel so sorry for her. Things have been so hard for her. So yeah, it all comes down to the fact that she has very little concern or respect for human beings, anybody but herself. I did find it interesting that once he started reading the sentence, the officer started getting in place and heading towards Sarah to put her in handcuffs and to block the aisle just in case anybody gets in the way. And I know they do that for every trial, but that's got to be such a sinking feeling when you see that officer coming towards you, knowing that he's coming to take you away for 20 years. So what do you think? 20 years, that's a long time. Do you think that's fair? Do you think it should have been less? I looked at some articles kind of across the internet and I saw a lot of comments like this. This is just sort of an example. This is what I saw on Facebook. And overwhelmingly, everybody agreed that 20 years was fair, and a lot of people thought it should be more. But you've got stuff like, Yes, thank you for getting this thug off the streets. 20 years will treat her right. I bet they changed the jail around for her next, though, because her dad's the sheriff. In fact, there was a lot of comments like that where it says, Daddy didn't fix this situation, thank God. Wow, I'm surprised Daddy couldn't get her out of it, etc., etc. So that seems to be the general consensus kind of across the internet, that 20 years was about right. So I just thought this was interesting because of how little remorse she showed. And then after watching the entire thing and kind of reading the whole story, I realized that honestly, if she had just apologized once, she probably would have had a reduced sentence, but she couldn't even do that. So I guess she'll have 20 years to practice apologizing. Anyway, I appreciate you guys so much. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.